What if the two people you trusted most in the world, your husband and your own mother, were hiding a secret affair behind your back? And what if that betrayal ended not just in heartbreak, but in murder? Today's story is about Alice Harris, a loving wife and mother from Austin, Texas, whose picture-perfect life shattered when she discovered her husband's dark secret. What followed was a chain of lies, betrayal, and a brutal crime that shocked an entire community. Stay with us, because this case is going to leave you questioning how well we ever really know the people closest to us. Alice Harris was 35 years old, living what many would call the American dream. She and her husband, Adrian, shared a spacious two-story home in suburban Austin, Texas. White picket fences lined the street, neighbors waved as they passed, and their garden, always neat and full of flowers, was a point of pride for Alice. It was the kind of place people would drive by and think, now that's a happy family. Adrian Harris was more than just a husband. He was the picture of success, a polished corporate attorney, ambitious and well-respected, known for his sharp suits and even sharper mind. He carried himself with confidence, the kind of man who could win a courtroom with his words alone. Alice, by contrast, was soft-spoken and nurturing. A devoted elementary school teacher, she poured her heart into her students and into raising her own children. Her colleagues admired her patience, her kindness, and her ability to make every child feel valued. Together, Alice and Adrian had built what seemed like an unshakable foundation. Their two children, 8-year-old Elliot, a curious boy with a love for science, and 5-year-old Molly, a sweet little girl with an infectious laugh, were the light of their lives. To their neighbors and friends, the Harris family looked flawless. On summer evenings, Adrian would toss a football with Elliot in the front yard, while Alice pushed Molly on the swing. Weekends often meant barbecues, family movie nights, or day trips to Lake Travis, where Alice and Adrian would watch their kids splash in the water and dream about the future. Alice often said her children were her greatest joy, but she also never stopped expressing gratitude for Adrian. She would tell her friends, "I married my best friend." To her, Adrian wasn't just a husband. He was her partner, a protector, a person she believed she could always depend on. Their love story stretched back years, beginning in college. Alice was a bright young education major, Adrian a rising star in pre-law. They met at a campus event, and from that moment, it was as though the world had written them into the same story. They studied together, graduated side by side, and married soon after. Friends described them as inseparable, two halves of a whole. Everything about their lives seemed enviable. The house, the careers, the children, and most of all, the sense of stability they projected to the outside world. But behind closed doors, life isn't always what it seems. Because what Alice didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that the very foundation of her perfect life was hiding a devastating secret. Over time, Alice began to notice small but unsettling changes in Adrian. At first, it was subtle. He started working late, often returning home long after the kids were asleep. Dinners that used to be full of laughter turned into Alice sitting alone at the table, reheating plates that went untouched. Weekends, once sacred family time filled with picnics, board games, and day trips, suddenly became filled with business trips. Adrian's explanations sounded rehearsed, vague. He claimed he had client meetings, networking events, or court obligations, but something in his tone didn't sit right with Alice. He grew moody and distant. For once he would share the details of his day, now his answers became short, even dismissive. When Alice tried to press for more, he would snap back with irritation or retreat into silence. And then there was his phone. In the past, Adrian would leave it lying on the kitchen counter or the coffee table without a second thought. Alice never had reason to question it, but now the phone was always in his pocket, always face down, and always locked. She noticed how quickly he grabbed it whenever it buzzed, walking out of the room to answer messages in private. Alice tried to explain it away. Adrian's job was stressful, demanding, unpredictable. Maybe the long hours and secretive behavior were just part of his career. Maybe he just needed space. But deep down, her instincts screamed otherwise. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Still, Alice was not the kind of woman to jump to conclusions. Whenever she felt uncertain, she turned to the one person she trusted more than anyone else in the world, her mother, Claire. Claire Harris had moved to Austin a few years earlier to be closer to her daughter and her grandchildren. She was a constant presence in their lives, babysitting, cooking family dinners, offering advice, and sharing in both the small joys and the everyday struggles of raising kids. To Alice, her mother was her confidant. On quiet evenings after putting Elliot and Molly to bed, Alice would pour a glass of wine, sit across from Claire at the kitchen table, and talk for hours. She would tell her about Adrian's mood swings, his long nights away from home, and her growing fear that their marriage was slipping walking away, and Claire listened. She comforted Alice. She told her not to worry, that Adrian loved her, that he was just under pressure. She played the role of the supportive mother perfectly, all while hiding the darkest truth imaginable. Because what Alice could never have suspected, what she could never have prepared for, was that the very person she leaned on for comfort was the same person betraying her in the most devastating way possible. One quiet morning, Alice was making coffee in the kitchen. The sun streamed gently through the blinds, the sound of the coffee maker filling the silence. Adrian walked in briefly, kissed her on the cheek, and placed his phone on the counter before stepping out of the room. It seemed like an ordinary moment until a notification lit up the screen. Alice glanced at it absent-mindedly at first, but then froze. The message was from her mother. It read, "I can't wait to see you again." Her heart stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Why? Why would her mother send something like that to her husband? Hands trembling, she picked up the phone. For a few seconds, she debated. Should she unlock it? Should she even look? Part of her didn't want to know. Part of her prayed it was just a misunderstanding, but curiosity and fear overpowered her. Alice entered Adrian's passcode. Phone unlocked, and in that instant, her entire world collapsed. Scrolling through the messages, Alice's eyes filled with tears. For months, possibly longer, Adrian and Claire had been exchanging passionate texts, hidden meetings, secret kisses, intimate details no wife should ever read, especially not written by her own mother. Alice's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Each word, each emoji, each promise between them was like a knife twisting deeper and deeper. Her husband, the man she built her life with, father of her children, was betraying her. And her mother, the woman she trusted more than anyone, her confidant, her best friend, was at the center of it. Alice sat down heavily at the kitchen table, clutching the phone as though it might explain itself, but it didn't. It only revealed betrayal after betrayal, line after line, detail after detail. She felt as though the ground beneath her had vanished. Hours passed as she sat there, numb. She wanted to scream, to smash the phone, to confront them both right then and there. But through the rage and heartbreak, another thought crept in. She needed to be careful. If she confronted them too soon, they could deny it. They could twist the truth. No, Alice had to be smart. So that night, while Adrian slept beside her, she quietly reached for his phone again. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the messages, this time taking screenshots, writing down dates and memorizing every detail. And she did it again, the next night and the next. Each discovery was worse than the last. Plans for secret weekends, promises whispered in the shadows, coded language meant to disguise their affair. The more Alice uncovered, the more her heart broke. Her marriage wasn't just in trouble, it was a lie. Her home, once filled with love and safety, now felt poisoned. Every room reminded her of deception. Every glance from Adrian felt like a mask hiding the truth. She wasn't just betrayed by one person, she was betrayed by the two people she trusted most. And now, Alice had a choice to make. Stay silent and let the lies consume her, or confront the devastating truth head on. On July the 14th, 2023, the tension inside the Harris home finally reached its breaking point. The day had seemed ordinary. The children, Elliot and Molly, played in the backyard until dusk before Alice tucked them into bed with kisses on their foreheads. But behind Alice's smile, her heart was racing. Tonight, she had decided, there would be no more silence. Downstairs, Adrian sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read the news on his tablet. His expression calm, his posture composed. But Alice knew better. She knew what he was hiding. She stood in the doorway, her hands trembling. For weeks she had carried the weight of betrayal, but the burden had grown unbearable. Her voice, though unsteady, cut through the stillness. "We need to talk." Adrian looked up cautiously, his eyes narrowing. "About what?" Alice stepped closer, her chest tightening, her pulse hammering in her ears. She felt her throat go dry, but she forced the words out. "I know everything, Adrian. I know about you and my mother." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Adrian's face drained of color. His tablet slipped from his hands and clattered onto the table. He opened his mouth, stammering, trying desperately to find an excuse to twist the truth. "Alice, that's not what you think." But she cut him off sharply, her voice rising. Don't lie to me anymore. I've seen the messages, I've read every word. You betrayed me, you betrayed our family." Her voice cracked on the last word, tears welling in her eyes. She couldn't bear to look at him a second longer. Overcome with rage, grief, and suffocating betrayal, Alice turned and stormed outside. The night air was cool, but her body was burning with fury. She gasped for breath, clutching her chest as she tried to steady herself beneath the dark Texas sky. Inside, Adrian sat frozen at the table, his mind spiraling. The truth was out. The affair, the secret he thought he controlled, was now a ticking time bomb. He saw his entire life collapsing in front of him, his marriage destroyed, his reputation ruined, his career in shambles. And then, panic began to shift. Fear gave way to anger, and anger gave way to something darker. He pushed back his chair and stood. His steps were slow at first, deliberate, as though in a trance, but the fury in his eyes was unmistakable. Moments later, he followed Alice outside. She turned, startled by his sudden presence, but before she could react, Adrian lunged. His hands clamped tightly around her throat. Alice gasped, clawing at his fingers, her eyes wide with shock and terror. She kicked, struggled, tried to scream, but her cries were muffled by the grip of the man she once loved. The world seemed to blur around her. The trees swayed overhead, the stars blurred in her vision, and the only sound was her strangled gasps for air. "Adrian, please," she tried to whisper, her voice faint, her strength fading. But Adrian's face was twisted with rage. To him, this wasn't just an argument anymore. It was the end. And in his mind, the only way to stop the collapse of his life was to silence her. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Alice's hands weakened, her resistance slowing. The life drained from her body as the man she once trusted above all else became her executioner. And then, it was over. Alice lay lifeless on the cool grass, her hair spread around her, her eyes still open in disbelief. Adrian staggered back, his chest heaving, his hands shaking as he stared at what he had done. In the silence of that suburban night, one horrifying truth echoed in his mind. He had murdered his wife. The next morning, the Harris family's quiet suburban street woke to the sound of sirens. Neighbors had noticed something unusual. The Harris home, normally full of life, sat eerily silent. And then, someone saw it. A figure lying motionless in the backyard. The call to 911 was frantic. Within minutes, squad cars lined the street. Detective Jessica Miller, a seasoned investigator with years on the force, arrived at the scene. She had handled homicides before, but what she found that morning would haunt her. There, beneath the early Texas sun, lay Alice Harris. Her body was stretched across the grass, her face pale, her eyes empty, and around her neck, clear, unmistakable marks of strangulation. It was immediately evident. This was no accident. This was murder. Inside the home, Adrian appeared shaken. He told officers he had just found her outside that morning. His voice wavered, his hands fidgeted. He insisted he had no idea what happened, but Detective Miller's instincts told her otherwise. Something about him felt wrong. His words were rehearsed, his grief forced. He wasn't the devastated husband he pretended to be. He was hiding something. Neighbors soon came forward. Several reported hearing muffled voices late the previous night, raised tones, a woman's cries, and then silence. And then came the most damning revelation. Alice's close friend confided to police that just days earlier, Alice had discovered something shocking. Adrian was having an affair, and not just with anyone, but with Alice's own mother. Suddenly, the case took a dark, twisted turn. Detective Miller followed the trail carefully. Forensics teams swept the home. They found fibers, fingerprints, and traces of Alice's DNA embedded in Adrian's clothing. The evidence painted a chilling picture. Adrian's alibi crumbled. His story fell apart under scrutiny. And when Claire, Alice's mother, was brought in for questioning, the facade shattered further. Under the pressure of the interrogation room, she broke down. Tearfully, she admitted to the affair with Adrian, but she insisted over and over that she never believed he would hurt her daughter. By now, all eyes were on Adrian. Detective Miller sat across from him in a sterile interrogation room. The walls closed in. The weight of the evidence pressed down on him. At first, Adrian denied everything. He maintained his innocence, insisted he was being framed, but his voice cracked, his composure slipped. Hours dragged by. Finally, Adrian broke. Through tears, he confessed. He admitted that Alice had confronted him. She had threatened to expose everything, his affair, his lies, the betrayal that would ruin his family and his career. And in that moment of rage, blinded by fear of losing it all, he strangled her. His words echoed in the cold room. The reality set in. Not only had he betrayed his wife and children, but he had taken Alice's life with his own hands. That confession sealed his fate. Adrian Harris, once the picture of suburban success, was now a murderer. The shocking case of Adrian Harris spread like wildfire. At first, it was the talk of Austin, but soon, the story captured headlines nationwide. A husband carrying on an affair with his wife's own mother and then murdering his wife in cold blood was almost too disturbing to believe. News anchors called it a betrayal beyond comprehension. Reporters flooded the courthouse. Crowds gathered outside, holding signs demanding justice for Alice. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled with neighbors, reporters, and curious onlookers who wanted to witness the downfall of the once respected attorney. The prosecution came prepared. Their case was built on layers of damning evidence. They began with Adrian's own words, his confession. The jury listened in silence as the recording played, Adrian's voice cracking as he admitted he strangled Alice during their confrontation. His attempt to sound remorseful only underscored the brutality of the crime. Then came the text messages between Adrian and Claire, Alice's mother. Message after message revealed the passionate affair, secret meetings, hidden embraces, and a plan to keep Alice in the dark. Each message felt like a dagger to Alice's legacy, proof of the betrayal that had torn her family apart. Finally, the forensic evidence was presented. Experts testified that Alice's DNA was found on Adrian's clothing. Bruising patterns on her neck matched the force of his grip, and crime scene analysts confirmed there was no intruder, no accident, only Adrian. The defense team tried to fight back. They painted Adrian as a man overwhelmed, a husband who had acted in emotional distress when cornered. They argued it wasn't premeditated murder, but a tragic outburst of passion. But the jury wasn't convinced. The evidence was too overwhelming. The betrayal was too deep. And the brutality of Alice's final moments was too clear. After deliberation, the verdict was read. Adrian Harris was found guilty of murder. The judge's gavel struck as the sentence was handed down, 55 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Adrian, once a polished attorney with a promising career, was now a broken man in shackles. Claire, the mother who betrayed her own daughter, sat sobbing in the gallery. She wasn't on trial for murder, but she would forever carry the weight of her role in the tragedy. And as the courtroom emptied, one truth lingered in the air. Alice Harris, a devoted mother and teacher, had paid the ultimate price for the lies and betrayals of the two people she trusted most. Alice Harris's death left behind more than just headlines. It left behind two young children, Elliot and Molly, who would grow up without the warmth of their mother's embrace. Her absence left a hole no one could fill. The bedtime stories, the morning hugs before school, the laughter in the living room, all of it silenced in an instant. For Alice's family and friends, the grief was unbearable. Not only did they lose her, but they were forced to live with the devastating knowledge that the betrayal came from within, the very people Alice trusted most. Claire, her mother, who should have been a source of unconditional love and stability, was instead bound to the tragedy forever. She wasn't behind bars, but she carried a different kind of prison, guilt, shame, and the permanent stain of having played a role in destroying her own daughter's life. And then there was Adrian, a man who once stood in courtrooms as a respected attorney, commanding authority and admiration, now reduced to an inmate, his entire future thrown away in a single night of rage and fear. Justice, in the eyes of the law, had been served. Adrian Harris would never walk free again, but the cost was staggering. A family shattered, a community shaken, and two children left to grow up in the shadow of a tragedy they never asked for. The Harris story stands as a haunting reminder. Sometimes, the greatest betrayals don't come from strangers, but from those we love most. This case is a chilling reminder that betrayal can come from the people we least expect, and that unchecked lies and secrets can spiral into unthinkable tragedy. What do you think? Should Adrian have received a harsher sentence? And do you believe Claire shares some responsibility in her daughter's death? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true crime stories, and hit the bell so you never miss an upload. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.